Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video. First of all, this is gonna be my new room, so from now onwards, we will be streaming and recording my videos in this brand new space. I'm still waiting for my PC, and when that happens, then the layout is definitely gonna change a little bit. So do excuse the change. Secondly, let's just talk about today's content. Today, we are gonna be going through essentially, like I promised in my previous CN Pure Fiction Guide video, I'll be going through with you guys pretty much most, if not every single potential team comps that you guys can try out in Pure Fiction. It's pretty much the much more extensive version compared to my previous guide where I mentioned Argenti, Himiko, Herta, as well as Bronya, right? And some of these picks, it might surprise you. We have some very interesting text that goes beyond team comps, such as running the 4-piece Ego win set or the 4-piece Thief set, specifically for this game mode, and not so much for Memory of Chaos, right? So if you guys are still struggling to do Pure Fiction, then I hope that this video is gonna be the one for you, right? Without further ado, let's get into today's content. Subscribe! So I'm not going to be going through the team comps that players already know that perform really well, namely Argenti and the Herta Himiko combo, and I'll be just touching about some units that did not get the airtime that they deserve compared to my previous CN Pure Fiction guide, right? And the list of units that we're going to be talking about today can be seen from this distribution over here. In the CN's opinion, these are the units that can pretty much ensure you get 30,000 points for one side, if not 40,000. And as you can see here, notice that Herta and Himiko, they are both in this rank, but if you were to use them together, then they will be in the same rank as pretty much OP, right? Because you have to use them together in order for their follow-up attacks to synergize with one another. Argenti by himself, he is pretty much the best of the best. There's a lot of variety we can run with over here, and the top of the list is actually going to be Seele. Now, I'm not sure if you guys have tried out Seele herself, but she performs exceptionally well because of her mob clearing capabilities, especially considering that each wave you do get around 5 enemies, and using Seele's skill into resurgence into an ultimate into resurgence, that pretty much ensures like a quadra kill. So even though she is the hunt unit, she is the only hunt unit that can consistently clear the mobs without any difficulty due to the power of resurgence. Not to mention, she also scales extremely well with Bronya, Rame, Jingyuan, Pela, and all these kind of supports that either increase her turns, energy, damage output, or action value, right? So Seele is something that players can use, and she has been an excellent carry ever since version 1.0. And speaking of 1.0, another unit that players might use is going to be Jingyuan. Jingyuan, he also performs exceptionally well in Pure Fiction because his skill and ultimate should be able to clear out the mob, and Lightning Lord will go ahead and deal a ton of damage to the either elite target or the boss target later at wave 3. One issue that Jingyuan may face is definitely going to be Lightning Lord's slow speed, as well as Savarok's hand grab, right? Especially if you guys have tried using Jingyuan. I swear to God, do not take my Jingyuan. If Jingyuan's personal damage capabilities were not high enough, such as if your skill and ultimate is not able to clear the mobs consistently, then a lot of damage potential will be wasted when Lightning Lord wastes the damage onto the mobs with like less than like 10 or 20% HP left. Because like I mentioned, Lightning Lord is a very slow unit, so ideally you do want to use Lightning Lord on the fresh wave in order to gain the maximum value out of Jingyuan. Nonetheless, he is still an excellent unit in this game mode, especially since his skill and ultimate does damage to all 5 targets, so he can still pretty consistently bring you guys the 30,000 to 40,000 points. Another unit, or rather the 3 destruction units, they are all performing really well, in particular Blade, because Blade is the only destruction unit that can actually hit all 5 targets using his follow-up attack. This follow-up attack can deal a ridiculous amount of damage. Not to mention, he pairs exceptionally well with both Bronya and Rame, which ensures that his damage potential is definitely still up there. This is in comparison to Imbibitor Lune and Jingliu. For Imbibitor Lune and Jingliu, the issue they face is that all of their damage output is mainly only targeted at 3 enemies, so it is impossible for them to instantly clear an entire wave by themselves. They have to stagger on with their skills, ultimate, so it is going to be a little bit slower compared to Blade. Between Imbibitor Lune and Jingliu, CN would think that Imbibitor Lune slightly outperforms Jingliu by a little bit, even at E0 because he doesn't have the downtime that Jingliu suffers from, which is when she's outside of a spectral transmigration. With proper usage, Imbibitor can even use a 2 skill point enhanced attack to just clear the mobs, and he can still pretty much match up these 3 target attacks. But this is not to say that Jingliu is completely not usable, because Jingliu's damage output is really high. It is just that for pure fiction, we don't really care for extremely high amounts of damage, but rather we want to focus on high frequency of damage, right? So because of this, Jingliu is pretty much gonna be in this position. Fire MC is actually a surprising pick from the CN community, likely because of her high ultimate uptime, especially if she were to taunt enemies and keep getting hit, then her ultimate can become really fast, as well as the 3 target enhanced basic attack, which can deal quite a high amount of damage, especially if the enemies are weak to fire. Keep in mind, fire break, it deals a flat amount of damage, a fixed amount of damage, upfront damage, as compared to physical break, which deals percentage of the enemy's max HP. So as such, Fire MC, or rather Fire Break in general, performs really well against mob scenarios. So therefore, Fire MC has a surprising high placement in the S tier over here. For Herta and Himeko, like I mentioned in my previous guide, if you were to separate both of them, they would not be in the OP God tier as compared to when you are actually combining them together, since they synergize with each other so well, right? Nothing much to talk about there. Excellent units. Now, Kafka, she performs really well, but there is a little catch, which is she doesn't perform well as a DOT unit. Rather, she performs better as a hyper carry. So instead of pairing her up with like Sampo, Guinaifen, Luca, she essentially just wants to be the hyper carry themselves. Reason being, she doesn't really care, she can't really wait for her DOT teammates to keep applying the DOT debuffs on the enemy target, because it's gonna be way too slow. So instead of doing that, you can just pretty much use Kafka as a hyper carry by herself, giving her Tingyuan, giving her Bronya, extra turn, extra energy, and just spam her ultimate and kill off the enemy mobs by herself. And since we are speaking about Kafka, energy regeneration rope as well as Herta's solitary healing light cone is really good. In fact, if you do this with Kafka and she consistently get kills, she can perform pretty much a 1 turn or even a 0 turn ultimate, which greatly increases her clear speed, right? So this is an example of how players can think outside of the box instead of sticking to the normal archetype that you might use in Memory of Chaos, right? So that's gonna be for Kafka. Now, talking about Welt also performs relatively well since its ultimate hits all 5 targets, just like pretty much most of our units over here. But one issue Welt may face is when using his skill, it might bounce to a single target that you might not want, and that's not something you might want to do with Welt, especially when it comes to the mobs, right? Because there's going to be so many different mobs. Welt's skill bounce is going to be very RNG dependent, so you might not really exactly control where do you want your hits to go. Another unit is going to be Clara. Clara unironically performs really well because there's so many mobs, which means that there's a lot of different targets that's gonna hit Clara, and Clara with an energy regeneration rope once again, as well as Tingyuan, can almost maintain a 100% uptime on her enhanced ultimate. And as you guys know, if Clara is in her enhanced ultimate, she's pretty much gonna do this 3 target AoE attack counter, regardless of whether she gets hit or any of her teammates gets hit. So her damage output is still relatively up there. The only downside with Clara is that her damage is a little bit more reactive as compared to proactive, which is pretty much most of our damage dealers over here. She needs to wait for the enemies to hit the team before she can deal high amounts of damage by herself. So comparatively speaking, it's gonna be slightly slower. Then moving on to the next unit is going to be Qingque. The deal with Qingque is generally, even though she's an erudition unit, her damage output is more so like a destruction unit, since the majority of her damage mainly come from the 4 of a kind into an enhanced basic attack into an autarky, and both enhanced basic attack and autarky only unfortunately hits 3 targets. Furthermore, if Qingque were to kill the main target with her enhanced basic attack, then autarky wouldn't even trigger. So she does face a little bit more difficulty when it comes to clearing 5 mobs as compared to most of our previous units. Speaking of high ultimate uptime, Staval is going to be a really good pick due to a very low ultimate cost. But the downside, like I mentioned with Qingque as well, is that her skill and as well as her basic attack is basically only 3 targets, so it's a little bit more clunky when it comes to trying to kill all 5 enemies at the same time. And this similar issue can also be shared by Arlen, right? So that is basically how they work. And one surprising pick from CN is actually going to be Pela. Main DPS Pela is becoming extremely popular because of number 1, how fast she can get her ultimate, and number 2, her perfect synergy with the Wind 4-piece set. Like I mentioned before, way back in the days, Pela is one of the only recipients that can perform really well with Wind set because her ultimate has such a fast uptime, right? Using a Wind set Pela as well as the tutorial light cone and energy regeneration rope, Pela can easily do a 1-turn if not a 0-turn ultimate. And this ultimate, especially in our current environment where there's a lot of ice weak enemies, is gonna be really beneficial. You can see her dealing a tremendous amount of damage even as a main DPS. If you don't want to use Pela as a main DPS, even as a sub DPS or even support, she can still do excellent amounts of damage to support your other main carry, right? So that's why Pela is still considered really good. Slight edit at this point, I noticed that this tier list, it is not strictly exhaustive as to which of these units are strictly better than one another. It is just generally speaking, all of these units are in the S tier. Some of these units have more flaws than the others, but at the end of the day, as long as these units can allow a player to get 30,000 to 40,000 points, then they're considered in this tier, which is pretty much almost, if not every single DPS unit. The only 2 units that CM believes that do have a little bit of an issue when it comes to pure fiction is going to be Yanqing as well as Topaz. Not a surprise to anyone because the biggest issues with these 2 units is their lack of ability to deal with mobs efficiently, right? Yanqing, his entire kit is basically single target. Topaz as well, even though if Topaz kills a target and Nambi hits another target, at the end of the day, all of their hits are only a single target. Wind Dunheng also suffers from a similar issue, and this will likely be applied to Dr. Ratio as well when he is released, right? So as long as units don't really have access to multi-targeted abilities, whether it be skill, ultimate, talent, or follow-up attacks, then they're definitely going to have an issue when it comes to clearing pure fiction. Not to say that they are a very horrible unit, it's just that for this specific game mode, they are not going to be able to compete as much as the other DPS roster. So towards the end of the video, I just want to share some really interesting mechanics that you guys can make use of regardless of what kind of team comps you're going to run, right? And number 1, like I mentioned just now with Pela, is going to be getting the 4-piece ego set. This 4-piece ego set has a really interesting use where a lot of players have been seeing use of this 4-piece ego set. Seele, Herta, Himeko, Pela, as long as your ultimate has a very fast uptime, this 25% action value advance is very beneficial. And considering that they are going to be your main DPS and you're going to be getting a lot of kills, the normal energy rotations that we will calculate from Memory of Chaos does not apply. You will not gain so much energy in a normal circumstance, right? Just repeatedly killing so many different enemies. So if players do manage to get themselves a rather excellent 4-piece ego set with nice crit subs, you can go ahead and try it with your Seele, Pela, and all these other units, and you can find exceptional results with them. That being said, if you guys don't have a 4-piece ego set, then you don't really need to run them. There's no point farming for them, especially when you want to be efficient with your resources, right? Just a good thing to have. Then another 2 set that pretty much have somewhat of a similar usage is going to be the 4-piece thief set as well as the 4-piece Grand Duke or the 4-piece flop set. These 2 sets, whenever you hit or break multiple enemies, their effect triggers multiple amounts of time, which means that if you were to use a 4-piece thief set with Argenti, which is one of the most popular builds in CN right now, he can gain a tremendous amount of energy because each individual break is individually 3 additional energy. Same thing for follow-up set. If you are able to hit 5 enemies with this 4-piece follow-up, you will instantly gain 5 stacks per follow-up attack, right? So you can very easily stack on 4-piece follow-up set. So these 2 sets, they can gain stacks very easily and therefore they perform really well. Then another thing that players might want to consider is an offensive energy regeneration rope. Because of how frequent players are getting kills with their units because of so many different mobs, you can get very high amount of value from an energy regeneration rope. So getting this additional 90.4% energy regeneration may often mean you cast your ultimate way more frequently as compared to just getting another 43% attack buff, right? So something for players to consider. And one last thing that players might want to choose is actually going to be the S5 Carve the Moon Battle Pass light cone. This specific light cone has been used by a lot of CN Zero Cycle community, where they basically just run Team Green with this light cone, RNG, roll for the energy regeneration, only for the energy regeneration, and the moment you get it, you can see that Argenti can very easily do a zero cycle, Herta can very easily do a zero cycle because of this additional energy regeneration paired up with the energy regeneration rope. So something that players might want to consider if they want to just try something. And with that, we have come to the end of today's content. If you guys would like to engage in any further discussions, feel free to hop onto my Discord at Pokke's Village, where we have a very active community talking about Honkai starrail on a daily basis. If you guys would like to check out my stream, that's going to be twitch.tv/MrPokke, where I stream 2 to 3 times a week. Schedule will be updated on Discord as well, right? I'm still in the process of moving my room. It's a little bit empty, as you guys can see. It will be completed very soon, not to mention my brand new PC, which will increase our productivity by a very large amount, right? So that's all I have for today's content. All the best in pure fiction, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. I genuinely cannot believe this shit. I genuinely cannot believe this shit. I genuinely cannot believe this shit, guys. Did I say how I genuinely cannot believe this shit? I genuinely cannot believe this shit, guys.